friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media. Russian TV is turning Orban's visit and the war in Ukraine into a tool for global reinterpretation. The latest episode of the federal talk show Big Game demonstrates the Kremlin's media strategy, characteristic of the late stages of the war in Ukraine, simultaneously creating the illusion of diplomatic activism, emphasizing international support, ignoring its own responsibility for the war, and constructing a new architecture for the international division of the world into the West and the rest of Eurasia. 1. Orban as proof of the European split and the Kremlin's attempt to regain political agency. At the beginning of the program, the hosts demonstratively highlight Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's visit. The scene itself, footage from Vnukovo, a list of Russian officials, comments about its historical importance, is intended to accomplish two goals. First, to show that Europe is bursting at the seams. Orban is described as a thorn in the EU's side, a man who blocks sanctions, and boldly talks about dialogue. The presenters actively emphasize the nervousness of European capitals. They're nervous. They're afraid of low prices for Hungary. This rhetoric obscures the reality. European complaints against Orban concern not energy, but Hungary's systemic deviation from the principles of the rule of law. But the Russian interpretation simplifies everything to an energy struggle and envy. Secondly, Orban is used as a tool for legitimizing Russia. The image of a head of state who continues to attract visitors despite international isolation is created. Dialogue continues, Europe needs Russia. This narrative fits into the overall strategy, demonstrating that Moscow remains part of the European security architecture, despite the war. It was always especially nerve-wracking when Orban did come, because Viktor Orbán is a thorn in the side of the European Union, from their perspective. He's the man who blocks any sanctions agreement, meaning any package against Russia, in Hungary's interests. And he's the man who has in fact built a completely democratic approach in opposition to what's happening in Europe. He says, "Look how much opposition I have in Parliament. Look who owns my committees in Parliament. I held a referendum and the people have spoken." And against this backdrop, of course, there's talk about how, in addition to the gas pipeline to Serbia, as Orban said, we'll help our neighbours and even build an oil pipeline. Of course, it seems to me that even the most basic of reasons, not even political or economic, but simple human greed, is nagging European politicians. How can this be? Hungary can afford to buy and negotiate for standard prices. 2. The Eastern Triangle and a demonstrative shift away from Europe. The next story is a series of reports on Russia's diplomatic contacts with India and China. The hosts call this not a tilt, but a direction, and Wang Yi's visit is presented as confirmation of a strategic partnership. The goal is to show the audience that Russia is not isolated, has alternatives to the West, is part of the global Asian consensus, is becoming part of the new center of the global economy. But most importantly, the idea is simultaneously introduced that Europe has excluded itself from relations with Russia. Putin's phrase that the EU has shrinked and Asia is expanding becomes the ideological core of the program. 3. War as proof of Russia's successes and the West's lies. The abrupt transition to a report from a correspondent in the Dnipropetrovsk region is the key moment of the program. It emphasizes 3 rhetorical goals. 1. Demonstration of territorial advancement. The announcement that Russian correspondents are already in the Dnipropetrovsk region is an attempt to psychologically bring the idea of the depth of the breakthrough closer to the viewer. In reality, such statements are impossible to verify. The Russian press has long abandoned real geographical references due to the risk of discrediting them. 2. Shifting responsibility to the West. The correspondent directly tells Europeans, "Your governments are lying to you. Russia is advancing quickly." This is a standard formula for Russian propaganda, an attempt to influence Western audiences by casting doubt on their own political leaders. 3. Militarizing the visual effect descriptions of minefields, trenches, kilometers of advance. All this emotionally reinforces the sense of inevitable victory. Russia is presented as an army that is not only advancing, but also has the moral right to show off during negotiations. 4. How European politics is presented: fear, envy, and impotence. The program thoroughly ridicules European leaders. Kaja Kallas, the elite in quotation marks. Ursula von der Leyen is the source of the nervous reaction. Merz is the last person the Kremlin would like to see. This approach deprives Europe of agency. The EU is portrayed as cowardly, dependent, incapable of playing the diplomatic game, based on propaganda, hostile to any peace initiative. In this context, Orban is not just the Hungarian Prime Minister, but a European politician who is still capable of rational thought. Think, analyze, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled. This was the program Empire of Lies.